In this video, I'm going to go over 10 things that modern tabletop RPGs think they get right, and 10 things that the OSR thinks that they get right, and my thoughts on them. So I'm going to begin with modern tabletop RPGs, and this doesn't just include D&D. This includes all kinds of different games like Powered by the Apocalypse or Dragonheart, you know, those kind of games. So one of the first things that they think they get right is player agency and narrative control. So games like Powered by the Apocalypse or Fate or like Dragonheart, they kind of give control of the world to not just the GM but also to the players, and it allows the players to have input into the story. And well, I do think that this is a really cool idea, and it's a definite bonus for people who like that kind of play style. I think that it loses a lot too for the people who have a real creative bent for creating unique and creative worlds. And I think that if you have that kind of a bent, then all of a sudden having player participation can kind of mess the world up for you. And it might be less enjoyable to the players that aren't as creative as, say, a creative GM is at making those. But that being said, for a GM that isn't as creative, for a GM that wants that kind of thing, then this is perfect. So I think that really boils down to play style. Streamline Mechanics, definitely, like modern games think that they get that right, and they definitely do that. I think that when you have a game like 5e, say, and I've already done videos on this, and you look at Dungeons and Dragons, they're completely different games. I don't think even comparing them makes sense, because the Dungeons and Dragons have so many subsystems. You use a D6 to detect things. Sometimes you use percentile dice. Take first edition D&D and the psionic system, for example. It's just got all kinds of different rules, subsets of rules. Whereas, a game like 5e and most modern games have a very streamlined kind of mechanic system. So I think that if you like that kind of thing, then definitely modern games, that's a bonus for them. But if you kind of like the doubt and the hesitation, the scariness that the old school brings with its subsystems and everything else, then you might find that a streamlined system like that is a little bit boring, especially if you can understand these systems easier. But, that being said, I think that the modern system, one thing that's really nice about it is if you're new to RPG games, then something like 5e is a really great starter game to get into. And then hopefully, eventually, people who played 5e might start looking at the OSR and get kind of curious about it. Because, the streamlined mechanics are great and all, but there's also something to be said for the more complex sort of divided up kind of rules, like all the mini little systems and stuff too, right? So one thing that modern games have, which I'm going to confess I don't really understand because I'm Gen X, but is emotional safety tools. So I see this in a lot of modern games, like the suggestion of having an X card, having Session 0 games, and even a second Session 0 game, where everybody explains their frailties and stuff and what offends them and everything, so that everybody has an idea of what they can and can't talk about, or what may or may not upset somebody. Well, I've never played in a game where anybody's gotten upset about the content of the game. It's never happened to me. So that's something that I think it's a generational thing. I haven't encountered that ever. But if you're playing with strangers, Maybe that's a really good idea. That's how it was put to me, and I think that was a great argument. If you're playing with strangers, then emotional safety is a great thing. Now, I've also seen a lot of stuff on the internet and stuff about how sort of younger generations, now we're talking, Z and Y and I don't know, whatever's coming up next, Alpha or something, that they don't really make friends anymore. And so that might be a key too, is if you don't really make friends, you don't really know the people you're playing with that well, then yeah, okay, I could see that. So I would say that that's a bonus. The other thing that I like too about modern games, and a point that they say that they do better, is systems where they fail forward. So if you fail, it doesn't mean like it does in the OSR. You failed, it just simply is a no. It's binary. It either happens or it doesn't happen. Whereas in more modern role-playing games, there's sort of a gray area. You take a game like Powered by the Apocalypse, where you can succeed with complications or you can fail with complications. And so a failure isn't necessarily a total failure. The narrative can still be pushed forward even though you failed. And I think that is a bonus. That is something I think modern games really, that's a cool aspect of modern games, I think. But it does reduce the deadliness of the games. And I think that that's one aspect to consider. Modern games, one thing that they seem to claim is that they have extensive advice and so forth on how to run games, how to handle different edge cases and managing table dynamics and that kind of thing. But I'll tell you that back in the day, we had Dragon Magazine and Dungeon Magazine and stuff. A lot of those had great advice. There was a lot of advice on how to play D&D. And I don't think modern games really can make that claim. I don't think that they hold I don't think that they hold a superior role in that. There was a lot of advice for the old school games. And that being said, there was also even more advice because in the OSR games, you were sort of supposed to have a hands-on experience with the game and make things yourself, write your own dungeons, draw your own dungeons. Modern games don't really cover that. Modern games seem to be more interested in getting you to buy their big, expensive books. It seems like, to me, especially with 5e, that's sort of what their goal is. And so, you take an adventure like this, and it's so full of razzle-dazzle and art and stuff. It's got to be incredibly intimidating to somebody who wants to start DMing to look at this. And, how are they going to make something like that when they've just discovered the game? Whereas you take something like, an old-school game like this, and they expected you to make it yourself. That was the whole purpose of it. So I think that even though modern games make that claim, I don't think it's a truthful claim. I think what they're actually trying to do is make big especially with 5e, but other games also, they're just trying to make big complicated adventures for you to purchase. And they sort of do it by giving you advice, but not really giving you advice that you could really use to make adventures. And you take a system like 5e in particular, where CR levels are kind of hidden in a mist. Like they've got, from what I've read, they've sort of got their own sort of formula for calculating them, and they won't actually tell anybody what that is. So they give this sort of convoluted way of doing it, so that it leaves creative DMs that want to create worlds of their own in kind of a limbo. It makes it kind of difficult to do. So I'm going to say that's not true. Actually, I would say they get that one wrong. It's BS. So another thing that modern games seem to claim is that they have balanced spotlight for the characters. So they give all the characters a chance to shine in meaningful moments sort of in the game, instead of having one player dominate the entire game. And that is an interesting thing, because that's a claim modern games make, that they're superior because of that. But you know what? That it was a thing. You could have that happen in the OSR, but it was sort of up to the DM to make that not happen. That was more DM skill and ability would keep that from happening, keeping one player just from dominating the whole thing. By introducing elements that would involve or bring in other players, modern games they sort of just overlook that by sort of pushing all the classes together so they're all sort of the same sort of class. I mean, there's really no separation between them. Not like there used to be. And so, again, I think that what I've said before is a game like 5e does not trust you to be a good DM. In fact, it kind of works against it. I would argue that it's actually hard to become a good DM if you're going to play 5e. I would say it's damn hard to become a good DM if all you played was 5e. You might get good at reading from books. You might be good at, the one rule that rules them all, rolling a d20 over a DC. But you're not going to get good at the nuances of, say, balancing out the distribution of the spotlight so that everybody gets to play in the game, where one character could totally dominate. But as a DM, you don't allow that to happen. And that was a real skill as a DM. In second edition, I played for years with quite a large group, and that was a big thing, was having to make sure everybody had a moment. I would think, as I laid out and set up adventures, how different people could shine in these different situations. So I think that that's a claim that modern games make, and I don't think it's a good claim. I think it's a fail, actually. They have, again, going back to the single system, where you have just rolling a d20 over a DC, or whatever kind of system is, rolling 8 better, 10 better on 2d6, like Power of the Apocalypse, or whatever system, rolling 2 12-sided dice. That, when that's used only for everything, that makes the system really, really a lot easier to adjudicate. And you don't have all the various different systems. I sort of already covered that. But modern games kind of take it as this is a bonus, it's a good thing, and it is. I have to agree, it is. I do like it, but I think I like it only in certain circumstances. I think that it's still a good idea to have some diverse rules, some rules within the rules, so that calculating odds and calculating your chances of stuff are a little bit cloudier. It just adds something to the game. It's very hard to explain, but having played both, I really feel it missing. Yeah, and the session zero, right? That's a big thing. Modern games really like their session zeros. Again, I don't know. I've never had that as a problem. I've played with groups online before of people I didn't know. It still wasn't really a problem. So I'm not sure what that's about. I guess that's something. If you need it, you need it, and it's good that it's there. Is it a feather in modern cap? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it is, because I'm not sure how necessary it is. I think there's maybe just a small percentage of the gaming community that actually needs that. So is it really necessary to burden everybody with it? I'm not sure. So some things that the OSR thinks that they get right, and my thoughts on that, like emergent gameplay, and that is that a lot of the puzzles you were expected to solve yourself. Your characters weren't expected. So if there was a riddle that had to be solved, or you had to figure out, a puzzle like a maze in a dungeon or something like that, the players actually had to figure it out. You couldn't just assign a DC to it and roll a die and use your intelligence modifier. So one thing that was kind of interesting about that, I mean, if you have a very intelligent character being played by a not very intelligent player, then obviously that character can never really be really intelligent, right? But we didn't really, there wasn't any cause to worry about that. Whereas in modern games, that sort of, you if you're not very intelligent, but your character's super intelligent, then you can just use a DC roll, right, to solve the riddle. Oh, I'll just make an intelligence roll. Oh, there we go. I solved it. It does answer the question of why, it does allow someone who maybe isn't, cognitively strong to play a character that is, but I think it kind of makes the game a lot less fun. So I think in that way, like the OSR expecting the actual players to solve the problems, expecting them to figure out how to organize themselves so that they can take on dangerous stuff. I do think that that's an aspect that modern games have kind of lost. Modern games don't even ask for a marching order or anything much, so tactics are pretty much getting removed from modern games. A lot of modern games, not all, but a lot. And I think the tactics is a big thing in the OSR. So I do think that that is something that is a good aspect of the OSR. So resource management in the OSR, a lot of OSR is tracking supplies, how many torches you've used, that kind of thing. Keeping track of rations, keeping track of arrows. You know what? I don't think that that's a feather in the OSR's cap, because almost every DM and every game I've ever played in, that was only sort of kept track of. Like, people really didn't care and didn't have time for it. And even my game right now, some people try and keep track of it. Some people don't really keep track of it. I don't think from my experience, most people pay any attention to it. So I would say that's not really a feather in their cap, right, at all. So one thing I think is that OSR does have is that the decisions that the characters make, or the players make for their characters, however you want to phrase it, that if they make wrong choices, they're dead. Not so in modern games. Like I say, in modern games, you're sort of failing forward, right? It's very hard to die in 5e. It's very easy to die in OSR. So that is definitely a claim that the OSR makes, that their game is way more deadly, and it's absolutely true. Does it make the game better? I think it does. I think Dungeons and Dragons ends up being a lot better, but it's very frustrating for early adopters and people to get into it. I can see starting on 5e and then maybe moving over to the OSR. However, that's a little like playing a video game with the cheat codes on and then going over to something like old school Coleco Donkey Kong, where it's just every level's the same, it just gets a little bit faster. Or playing Asteroids, where every level's the same, it just gets a little bit faster. I mean, that's sort of the gaming philosophy that was behind Dungeons and Dragons, because that was what was around sort of in the electronic game area. And if you look at a game like 5e that are not deadly, and they're you get to just start over again, you just respawn and away you go. And so there is, I think, a desire to sort of bring that into the game. Whatever's happening in the electronic gaming world, there's the zeitgeist of the electronic gaming world. I think that there's a tendency to want to bring that into the modern game, or into the game. And they certainly did it with the OSR, and they've done it with modern games. I think that is something that really makes the games feel different. It's just the whole gaming industry, not just tabletop RPGs, but the whole thing has sort of moved in that direction. OSR tabletop RPGs emphasize is dungeons and wildernesses, right? And solving puzzles and stuff like that. And not just having backgrounds and, little checks, but to actually have to actually be in the world and apply your own experiences to that. I think that it's good and that's bad at the same time, because unless you've spent a lot of time out in the wilderness and so forth, you don't really understand it that well. So if you're looking at, you're going to go out exploring and you don't know what it's like to wake up in the morning with all your equipment damp and wet, it's going to be kind of hard to role play that. I don't know if that makes any sense. The other thing too is that there's player skill versus character skill. And modern games put a lot of emphasis on character skills, but the OSR puts a lot of emphasis on player skills. Players' ability to suss out what's going on, the ability to use their character in clever ways to try and overcome obstacles and puzzles and stuff like that, as opposed to modern games that give you little bonuses and give you a DC and just roll a D20 and off you go. I do think that Dungeons and Dragons does that better. I think that's one of the major elements missing from modern games. Then there's the sandbox freedom of the OSR, the open-ended campaign structures that the OSR sort of promotes, letting players pursue their own goals and interests instead of following predetermined paths. And I mean, there's so many of these books, great big giant adventures. So you're sort of on so with modern games, you can tend to end up on sort of a ladder, and directed in what direction you're going to go. This is something I noticed. Like I'm saying, this isn't a problem only that like certain games, certainly Dungeons and Dragons, pretty much emphasize the sandbox freedom, being able to go whatever direction you wanted, whatever. But lots of modules didn't. And some games didn't, like Warhammer. Some of their modules that came out were very railroady. And that's what that's called. When you don't have many options, you end up railroaded. And I think that modern games give a lot of fake advice to try and give you the impression that you're not really being railroaded. Whereas the OSR gave more authentic advice, especially in the Dragon magazines and stuff, right? Not so much in the rules. But they gave advice to sort of be more open-ended and to allow strange things happen, like wandering monster tables were all over the place, random magic items, magic tables, that kind of thing. And so you made your own path for your hero. So I think the OSR definitely gets that right. The other thing is the OSR has their simple characters. So if you're a fighter, you're playing a fighter. Whereas in modern games, if you're playing a fighter, you might be playing a fighter, but it depends what your backgrounds, your different skills, whatever you're doing, whatever game system you're playing. You can basically turn a fighter into just about anything. You turn a mage into just about anything. Like there's really a lot of leeway in what the players can be, right? Depending on what races you pick and what skills and so forth you pick. Whereas in the OSR, basically you're locked into whatever it is you're playing. Even with the older, even your race would lock you in because they had race as class. So you didn't divide between your race and your class. You could be a human, which meant you could be a fighter, mage, cleric, or thief, right? Or you could be like a hobbit or a halfling or an elf, and those were sort of their own classes in and of themselves. But a halfling couldn't be a fighter, a halfling couldn't be a cleric. An elf wasn't going to be a wizard. That came later on. That came in first edition D&D, where it sort of divided things up like that. So it depends on what OSR version you're playing, obviously. But even the ones like even the ones like first edition D&D or second edition D&D, the character classes were very structured, and you didn't have much leeway. That really came around with third edition, is when that line really started getting blurred. And then fourth edition just knocked it out of the park. All the classes were basically pretty much like the same, and that really emphasizes how, like in fourth edition, tabletop RPGs really went in the direction of World of Warcraft. And, fourth edition really did. I've heard arguments for and against this, but fourth edition really did feel like you were just playing World of Warcraft without a computer. And, right or wrong, that's certainly how I felt about it. Yeah, so those are just some of my thoughts. This isn't my list of what's best about the OSR or best about modern games. These are just sort of things that I've seen on the internet that people have said is best about the OSR or best about modern games. And so I just thought I'd go through them and give my opinion on them, whether I thought they were realistic or not. hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I hope that you'll leave me a like, and that you'll subscribe and leave a comment. If you think I'm wrong or I missed something, I'd love to hear it. Or you've got a finer point to make about something, I would love to hear it. And so, yeah, thank you for watching.